Derek Hunt wiped the grease off his hands and looked around his tiny repair shop. The place wasn't much. Just a cramped room on the lower deck of Station Kepler VI, filled with broken machines, spare parts scattered everywhere, and a workbench that had seen better days. The rent was due in 3 days, and he was short. Again. Outside his shop window, aliens of every shape and size walked past. Most didn't even glance his way. Humans weren't exactly popular this far out in space. Most aliens figured human mechanics were sloppy, unreliable. They preferred their own kind. Derek couldn't really blame them, but it made earning a living pretty hard. He was about to close up early when 3 small figures appeared in his doorway. Kids. Alien kids, but kids all the same. They were Valorians, he thought, though he wasn't great with alien species. They had smooth blue skin and large eyes that seemed to take up half their faces. Right now, those eyes looked red and puffy, like they'd been crying. The oldest one, maybe 8 or 9 in human years, stepped forward first. She clutched something against her chest. The other 2 hung back, a boy and a smaller girl who couldn't have been more than 5. "Please, mister," the older girl said in broken Galactic Common, the language most species use to communicate. Her accent was thick, and she struggled with the words. "Can you fix?" She held out a mechanical bird. It was beautiful, even broken. Made from some kind of bronze metal with intricate feather patterns etched into every surface. But one wing hung at a wrong angle, and when Derek took it, he could hear something rattling loose inside. The boy stepped forward next, holding out a puzzle box covered in strange symbols. It looked ancient, the kind of thing you'd see in a museum. But the sliding panels were jammed, and one corner was completely smashed in. The little girl was lost. She cradled a small hovering drone, the kind kids played with all over the galaxy. Except this one wasn't hovering. It just sat lifeless in her tiny hands, its lights dark. Derek looked at the toys, then at the kids. They were trying so hard to be brave, but he could see they were terrified he'd say no. Their clothes were dirty, like they'd been wandering around for a while. The little one's stomach growled loud enough for him to hear. He should have said no. These toys were practically junk. The parts alone would cost more than he'd make in a week, and these kids obviously had no money. He had rent to pay. Bills stacking up. Saying yes was stupid. But then the little girl looked up at him with those huge eyes, and something in his chest twisted. She reminded him of his niece back on Earth. Little Kelly, who'd cried for a whole day when her favorite toy broke last Christmas. "All right," Derek heard himself say. "Sit down over there. You guys hungry?" The kids didn't understand all his words, but they understood the gesture when he pointed to his lunch container. He'd packed 2 sandwiches and some fruit. He handed it over and watched them devour it like they hadn't eaten all day. While they ate, Derek got to work. He started with the mechanical bird. The delicate kind of work he actually enjoyed. He carefully opened the access panel and found the problem immediately. The central gyroscope had snapped, and several microgears had come loose. Parts he didn't have. So he improvised. That's what humans did best. He pulled apart an old navigation sensor, extracting gears that were almost the right size. He filed them down by hand until they fit, then carefully reassembled the bird's internal mechanisms. But he didn't stop there. While he was inside, he noticed the sound chip was primitive. He swapped it out for a better one from his spare parts bin. The puzzle box was trickier. The locking mechanism was completely alien to him. It took him an hour just to figure out how it worked. But once he understood the pattern, fixing it was straightforward. He hammered out the damaged corner, replaced the broken sliding rail with a piece of flexible steel, and polished the whole thing until it gleamed. The drone was the easiest. Just a fried power cell and some corroded connections. He cleaned the contacts, installed a new cell, and upgraded the stabilization system while he was at it. No point doing a half job. 3 hours passed. The kids had fallen asleep on his old couch, curled up together like puppies. Derek smiled. He tested each toy. The bird's wings spread, and it let out a beautiful song, way better than before. The puzzle box clicked and slid smoothly. The drone hummed to life, floating steadily in the air. "Hey," he said softly, waking them. "All done." The kids' faces lit up like he'd given them the galaxy itself. They grabbed their toys, laughing and chattering in their own language. The little girl made her drone do loops in the air. The boy twisted his puzzle box, delighted when it actually worked. The older girl held her bird like it was made of glass, tears streaming down her face. "How much?" she asked nervously, pulling out a handful of strange coins. Derek waved it away. "Nothing. Kids don't pay. Now get out of here before I change my mind." They looked confused. The older girl said something to the others, then all three rushed forward and pressed their foreheads against his hands. It felt formal somehow, important. Derek had no idea what it meant, but it seemed to matter to them. Then they ran out, laughing and calling back words he didn't understand. Derek sat back down at his workbench, looking at his empty lunch container and the small pile of coins they'd tried to pay with. He was still broke. Rent was still due. But somehow, he felt better than he had in months. Derek noticed something weird the next morning. When he opened his shop, there was a small basket sitting outside his door. Inside were strange purple fruits he'd never seen before, some kind of bread wrapped in leaves, and a carved wooden figure. He looked around. The station corridors were busy as always, but no one seemed to be paying attention to him. He shrugged, brought the basket inside, and got to work on a busted water filtration unit someone had dropped off. The next day, there were more gifts. Flowers this time, if you could call them that. They glowed faintly blue and smelled like vanilla. Next to them was a smooth stone with swirling patterns carved into it. Derek picked it up, confused. Who was leaving this stuff? By the third day, he started to notice them. Valorians. The blue-skinned aliens with the big eyes. They'd walk past his shop, slow down, stare at him for a moment, then hurry away. Some would stop across the corridor, just watching. Not threatening or anything. Just watching. It was starting to creep him out. On the fourth day, he counted at least a dozen Valorians who walked past just to look at his shop. Some pointed. Others whispered to each other. A few even bowed slightly before moving on. Derek had no idea what was happening. Am I going crazy? He muttered to himself, trying to focus on repairing a broken communicator. His human neighbor, old Pete who ran a noodle stand 2 doors down, stopped by that afternoon. You do something to upset the Valorians? Pete asked, scratching his gray beard. They've been hovering around here all week. I don't know, Derek said honestly. I fixed some toys for some kids. That's it. Pete raised an eyebrow. Valorian kids. Yeah. Why? Valorians are weird about debts and honor and stuff, Pete said. Maybe you accidentally offended them somehow. Be careful, kid. They're powerful folks. That didn't make Derek feel any better. He went back to work, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The gifts kept coming. Food, mostly. Fancy stuff he couldn't afford in 100 years. Carved art pieces. Once, someone left what looked like an expensive piece of jewelry. Derek didn't know what to do with any of it. He ate some of the food because it seemed wasteful not to, but the rest he just stacked in the corner of his shop. Then, on the 7th day, one of them finally came inside. She was a Valorian woman, middle-aged if he had to guess, though it was hard to tell with aliens. She wore the kind of fancy robes that merchants wore, and she looked nervous. Hello, she said in perfect galactic common. You are the human mechanic, yes. That's me, Derek said, wiping his hands on his pants. Need something fixed? No, I. She paused, looking around his shop like she was searching for something. Her eyes landed on his workbench, on the tools he'd used to fix the toys. She went completely still. Is something wrong? Derek asked. You fix toys here, she said quietly. 3 children. Small ones. Yeah, about a week ago. Why? Did I do something wrong? The woman's eyes went wide. She took a step back, and Derek noticed her hands were shaking. You don't know, she whispered. You truly don't know. Know what? Derek was getting frustrated now. Lady, if I did something wrong, just tell me so I can fix it. The woman looked at him for a long moment, like she was trying to decide something. Then she leaned in closer and lowered her voice, even though they were alone. Those children, she said. They were the royal heirs. The offspring of the High Mother herself. The ruler of all Valorian worlds. Derek felt like someone had dumped ice water down his back. What? The High Mother, the woman repeated. Our supreme leader. Those were her children. Her precious heirs. No, Derek said, shaking his head. No way. They were just kids. Dirty kids with broken toys. They couldn't even afford to pay me. They were hiding, the woman explained, speaking faster now. There was an incident. A political thing. The toys were stolen from the royal palace by enemies, damaged and thrown away. The children found them in the market, but they were too frightened to tell anyone who they were. They wandered the lower decks for days. Derek's legs felt weak. He sat down hard on his stool. You're joking. I do not joke about the royal family, the woman said seriously. Those toys you repaired? They were irreplaceable heirlooms. Made by the High Mother's deceased life partner. When they were stolen and destroyed, she grieved for days. She had accepted them as lost forever. But I just... Derek gestured helplessly at his workbench. I just fixed them. It wasn't that hard. Our master craftsman examined them, the woman said. They declared the damage too severe. They said the toys were beyond repair. But you, a human mechanic in a small shop, you restored them. You made them better than they were before. Derek's mind was racing. Those kids. Royal heirs. The way they'd pressed their foreheads to his hands. That must have been some kind of royal gesture. Oh no, he said. Oh no, no, no. The entire Valerian community on this station knows what you did, the woman continued. That's why they're leaving gifts. That's why they watch. You've been blessed by the royal family. You've done them a service beyond measure. Derek put his head in his hands. I'm in so much trouble, aren't I? The woman's expression softened slightly. The High Mother wishes to meet you. Tonight. At the Valerian embassy. What if I say no? I would not recommend that. Derek looked up at her. Am I going to be arrested? I don't know, she said honestly. But I do know this. You've changed everything. Derek had never been inside the Valerian embassy before. The whole place made him nervous. Everything was too clean, too fancy, too important. Guards stood at every corner, their faces expressionless. The walls were covered in artwork that probably cost more than his entire shop. They led him through long corridors until they reached a massive door. It slid open with a soft hiss, and Derek found himself in the biggest room he'd ever seen. The ceiling stretched up so high he could barely see it. Windows lined one wall, showing the stars beyond the station. And in the center of the room, sitting on what could only be described as a throne, was the High Mother. She was tall. Really tall. At least 7 feet, maybe more. Her blue skin seemed to shimmer in the light, and her eyes were a deep purple color that Derek had never seen on a Valerian before. She wore flowing robes that looked like they were made from liquid silver. Everything about her screamed power and authority. Derek felt about 2 inches tall. Around her stood at least 20 other Valorians. Advisors, he guessed. All of them were staring at him like he was some kind of strange specimen they were trying to figure out. Approach, the High Mother said. Her voice was deep and commanding, but not unkind. Derek walked forward on shaky legs. He'd been in tough situations before, but this was different. This was royalty. Actual alien royalty. And he'd apparently done something to get on their radar. When he reached what he thought was a respectful distance, he stopped and tried to bow. He had no idea if that was the right thing to do, but it seemed better than nothing. You are the human mechanic, the High Mother said. It wasn't a question. Yes? Your, Highness. Your Majesty? Derek had no idea how to address her. I'm Derek Hunt. Derek Hunt, she repeated, like she was testing how the name felt. You repaired toys for 3 children 1 week ago. I did. Those children were mine. My heirs. My precious offspring. Derek swallowed hard. So I heard. I didn't know at the time, I swear. They just looked like kids who needed help. Something flickered across the High Mother's face. Surprise, maybe? It was hard to read alien expressions. You did not know, she said slowly. You helped them without knowing who they were. Yes, She leaned forward slightly, studying him with those purple eyes. The toys you repaired were irreplaceable. They were crafted by my deceased life partner. When they were stolen and destroyed, I believed them lost forever. I mourned them as I mourned him. Derek felt a lump in his throat. I'm sorry for your loss. The High Mother continued, my finest craftsmen examined those toys. They told me the damage was too severe. That restoration was impossible. Yet you, a human in a small repair shop, accomplished what they could not. And you asked for nothing in return. They were just kids, Derek said. They were hungry and scared. I couldn't just turn them away. The High Mother stood up. She was even taller than he'd thought. She descended from her throne and walked toward him. Derek resisted the urge to step back. Derek Hunt, she said formally, you have placed me in an enormous debt. My culture values honor above all things. You have shown great kindness to my heirs, and you have restored what I thought was lost forever. I must repay this debt. Derek shook his head. No, really, there's no debt. I was just being decent. Any person would have done the same thing. The reaction was immediate. The advisors around the room erupted in shocked whispers. A few gasped out loud. One of them stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "How dare you?" the advisor shouted. "The High Mother offers you honor, and you insult her by refusing." Derek looked around, confused. "What? I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just saying there's no debt. I don't want anything." "That is precisely the insult," another advisor said coldly. "By refusing to acknowledge the debt, you suggest the High Mother has nothing of value to offer. You diminish her honor." "That's not what I meant at all," Derek protested. He looked at the High Mother. "I just meant I don't need to be paid for helping kids. Where I come from, that's just what you do. You help people because it's the right thing to do." The High Mother held up a hand, and the room fell silent immediately. She studied Derek for a long moment. "Your culture," she said carefully, "does not value honor debts." "We value honor," Derek said. "But we don't think of kindness as creating debt. If someone helps you, you say thank you, and you try to help others when you can. That's it." "Fascinating," the High Mother murmured. "And deeply troubling." "Why troubling?" "Because I cannot let this debt stand unaddressed," she said. "It would shame my entire family. My heirs would grow up bearing the weight of an unpaid obligation. In my culture, such a thing is unbearable." Derek ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Okay, so what happens now?" "Now," the High Mother said, "we find a way to satisfy both your culture and mine. I will offer you rewards. Wealth. Position. Land on the Vailian homeworld. A title within my court." "I don't want any of that," Derek said. "I like my shop. I like fixing things. I just want to go back to my normal life." The advisors erupted again. This time, their voices were even more angry. Derek was starting to realize he'd stepped into something way bigger than he understood. This wasn't just about fixing toys anymore. This was about two completely different ways of seeing the world, and somehow he was stuck in the middle. The next few days were chaos. Derek tried to go back to his normal life, fixing broken equipment and minding his own business. But the Valorians wouldn't let it go. The High Mother had made it clear that she wouldn't rest until the debt was repaid. It was about honor, she said. About setting an example for her children. Every morning, Derek would find new gifts outside his shop. Expensive ones now. Tech he couldn't even identify. Containers of what looked like precious metals. Once, there was a data pad with property deeds to land on 3 different planets. He refused them all. Old Pete stopped by one afternoon, looking worried. "You're making waves, kid. Big ones." "I'm not trying to," Derek said, frustrated. "I just want them to leave me alone." "Well, they won't." Word spreading through the station. "The Valorians are divided on what to do about you." "Divided how?" Pete leaned against the workbench. "Some of them think you're proof that aliens can be worthy of respect. That's a big deal. Valorians usually stick to their own kind. They're pretty strict about hierarchy and all that. But you helped their royal kids without knowing who they were, so some are saying maybe outsiders deserve a chance." "That sounds good, doesn't it?" Derek asked. "Maybe. But others think your refusal to accept payment is an insult. They're saying you're too proud, that you think you're better than the High Mother. There's talk about making an example of you." Derek's stomach dropped. "What kind of example?" "Nothing violent," Pete said quickly. "But they could ban you from Vailian sectors, freeze your accounts, make it impossible to do business on the station. You're human, Derek. We don't have a lot of protection out here." "Great. Just great." Derek had fixed some toys, and now he was in the middle of an alien political mess. But things got even more complicated the next day when the 3 kids showed up at his shop again. The older girl, whose name Derek had learned was Lyra, knocked politely before entering. Behind her were her younger siblings, Kale and little Myra. They all looked excited to see him. "Teacher Derek." Myra shouted, running forward. "Hey, hold on," Derek said, confused. "I'm not your teacher." "You are now," Lyra said matter-of-factly. She pulled out a small device that was clearly broken. "Can you fix this? I tried to take it apart to see how it worked, but now it won't turn back on." Derek sighed. He couldn't say no to kids. He took the device and started examining it while they watched, fascinated. Over the next week, the visits became regular. The kids would show up almost every day, bringing broken things or just asking questions. They wanted to know everything about humans. What Earth was like. Why humans built things differently. How Derek had learned to fix so many different types of machines. At first, Derek worried he'd get in trouble for spending time with royal heirs. But their guard stood outside and didn't interfere. Maybe the High Mother had approved it. He wasn't sure. Through the kids, Derek started learning about Valyrian culture. And the more he learned, the more he understood why this debt thing was such a big deal. One afternoon, Kale asked him, "Why do you help people for free sometimes?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Derek answered, soldering a connection on a toy robot. "If someone needs help and I can give it, why wouldn't I?" The three kids looked at each other like he'd said something shocking. "But they're below you," Lyra said carefully. "In status, I mean. In our culture, higher status people don't help lower status people without payment. It disrupts the order." Derek put down his soldering iron. "That seems kind of cold." "It's just how things are," Lyra said. "Everyone has their place. The higher ones lead, the lower ones follow. Mixing between levels is uncomfortable. So when I helped you guys," Derek said slowly, "without knowing you were royalty. You treated us like equals," Myra finished. "Like we were just normal kids." "You are just normal kids," Derek said. "Fancy titles don't change that." Kale shook his head. "No one has ever said that to us before. Everyone always treats us differently because of Mother's position." Derek was starting to understand. Valyrian society was like a ladder. Everyone had their rung, and you weren't supposed to reach across rungs without formal arrangements. Kindness without expectation of reward? That didn't fit anywhere in their system. No wonder the High Mother was having such a hard time with this. What if someone just wants to be nice? Derek asked. No payment, no debt. Just nice. It doesn't happen, Lyra said simply. Or it didn't, until you. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what the kids had told him. The Valorians weren't being difficult on purpose. They literally couldn't understand his perspective because their whole society was built on a different foundation. And then, somewhere around 3 in the morning, an idea hit him. The next day, Derek requested another meeting with the High Mother. When the message came back, she'd agreed to see him that evening. Old Pete looked at him like he was crazy. You're going back? Why? Because I think I figured out a way to fix this, Derek said. A way that works for both of us. This better be good, kid. It's either good or I'm about to make everything much worse, Derek admitted. But I have to try. Derek stood before the High Mother again, this time with more confidence. He'd spent all night thinking about his proposal, and he believed it could work. I'll accept your debt, Derek said, but only if you accept mine in return. The High Mother's eyes narrowed. Explain. You say I've done you a service by fixing those toys and helping your kids. Fine. I accept that. But your kids have done something for me too. They've taught me about your culture. They've spent hours in my shop, showing me how Valorians think and build things. That's valuable. One of the advisors started to object, but the High Mother silenced him with a gesture. Derek continued, so here's what I propose. Let me teach repair skills to young Valorians. Not just your kids, but others too. Free classes. In exchange, they teach me Valyrian crafting techniques. We share knowledge. That's how humans balance debts. We pass things forward. The room went completely silent. Derek could see the advisors processing this strange idea. Teaching across status levels? Sharing knowledge freely? It went against everything they knew. But the High Mother was thinking. Derek could see it in her eyes. She understood what he was really offering. Not just a way to satisfy the debt, but something that could benefit everyone. This is highly irregular, she said finally. So was a human fixing impossible toys, Derek countered. The faintest smile crossed her face. Indeed. Very well. I accept your proposal, but with conditions. You will be given a formal title. Friend of the High Nest. It grants you special status within our community. I don't need a title. But we do, she said firmly. Without it, what you propose cannot work within our system. This title makes you an exception. It allows the teaching to happen without disrupting the social order. Derek thought about it. If a fancy title was what it took to make this work, he could live with that. Okay. Deal. The transformation happened faster than Derek expected. Within a week, his small repair shop had been expanded. The High Mother had somehow convinced his landlord to give him the 2 adjacent spaces. Now he had room for multiple workbenches, storage for parts, and enough space for students to work without bumping into each other. Lyra, Kale, and Myra were his first students, of course. But soon other young Valorians started showing up. Some were from wealthy families. Others were from lower status groups, which surprised Derek until Lyra explained that the High Mother had declared his workshop a neutral space where normal rules didn't apply. Derek taught them human engineering. How to improvise when you didn't have the right parts. How to make something work with whatever materials you had available. How to think modularly, building systems that could be easily repaired or upgraded. Most Valorians were used to precise, perfect craftsmanship. The idea of good enough for now was foreign to them. In return, they taught him Valian techniques. The patience to work on a single piece for hours, getting every detail perfect. The art of biological machines that grew and adapted. The mathematics behind their crystalline power sources. Derek realized that humans and Valorians approached problems from completely different angles, and combining both methods created something better than either alone. Word spread beyond the Valian community. A young Thraxian showed up one day, asking if Derek would teach him too. Then a pair of Zenthai siblings. Within 3 months, Derek's workshop had become a meeting place for young beings from half a dozen different species. The shop was chaos most days. Happy chaos. Kids arguing about the best way to fix a broken communicator. Adults from different worlds collaborating on repair projects. The smell of soldering irons mixed with the sweet scent of Valian incense. Tools from a dozen different cultures scattered across the workbenches. Derek found himself working harder than ever, but he'd never been happier. He'd gone from barely making rent to running the most diverse workshop on the station. The High Mother had quietly started paying him a salary as an official cultural liaison, though she'd framed it as payment for teaching her heirs. Derek suspected it was really just her way of making sure he didn't have to worry about money. One afternoon, about 5 months after the whole thing started, a human woman walked into his shop. She had a professional air about her and carried a recording device. "Derek Hunt?" she asked. "That's me. Something need fixing?" "I'm Rachel Torres. I'm a reporter for the Outer Colonies News Network. I've been hearing stories about you. Mind if I ask you some questions?" Derek glanced around his workshop. It was packed as usual. Myra was showing a Thraxian kid how to calibrate a scanner. Kale and a human teenager named Billy were arguing about gear ratios. Lyra was carefully explaining Valian crystal growing to 3 fascinated students. "I guess," Derek said. "But I'm not that interesting." Rachel smiled. "That's not what everyone else says. So tell me, do you regret it? That one act of kindness that started all this?" Derek watched Myra laugh at something her Thraxian friend said. He saw Billy and Kale figure out their problem and high-five. He noticed Lyra's students carefully handling their first-grown crystals with reverence. "No," Derek said simply. "I fixed some broken toys for some kids. Everything else? That's just what happens when you treat people like people, you know? When you stop worrying about status and rules and just help each other out." "The High Mother says you've started changing Valian culture," Rachel said. "That because of you, they're reconsidering some of their social structures." Derek shrugged. "I don't know about all that. I just wanted to teach kids how to fix things." But as he looked around his workshop, at beings from different worlds working side by side, learning from each other, he realized maybe he had changed something after all. Not through grand gestures or political maneuvering. Just by being decent to some kids who needed help.